So here's the thing about Catra from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Definitely one of the more controversial characters from this show, but also one that I feel is largely misunderstood by a decent portion of the series audience. There's a lot of discussion, at least from what I've seen, about how Catra didn't receive enough punishment for her crimes, or that she didn't grow as a person to earn her happy ending, that her actions throughout the series warranted permanent imprisonment, banishment, or some other fitting retribution for her turn against the princesses and working for Hordak/Horde Prime, although she doesn't really do anything for Horde Prime, I will say. However, I truly loved Catra's arc through and through, even when she was at her darkest moments. Sure, she angered me and frustrated me at times, namely because of how she seemed to delight in Adora's pain, but she was always a fun, lively antagonist that I also always understood the decisions of as well. She was never out of character, I felt. In fact, I think this show does an exceptional job diving far into Catra's past, her connection to Adora and Shadow Weaver, and why she has gone so far down this ruinous path that we see for the majority of the show. Her being saved was definitely earned, in my opinion, and Season 5 was ultimately so insanely satisfying for her arc. Throughout the seasons, we get so much color and texture behind all of the, admittedly, terrible decisions that she's made, but I never found myself disliking or retroactively hating her for what she had done. In fact, I mostly felt only pity and sadness, which I'm sure that is exactly what they intended you to feel. As a child, Catra was always treated as less than, either ignored by Shadow Weaver, who favored Adora, or directly berated by her, and it is heavily implied that there was physical abuse and torture utilizing her magic as well. I mean, she had the ability to straight up freeze them in place and used it quite frequently. Terrifying for a child, and I love that one shot where it spins around them and it conveys just the gravity of Shadow Weaver's words to Catra's sense of self.
You have never been anything more than a nuisance to me. I've kept you around this long because Adora was fond of you, but if you ever do anything to jeopardize her future, I will dispose of you myself. Do you understand?
Because flat out, Catra was abused as a child. There's no other way around it. And while it doesn't excuse her behavior later in the series, it does certainly explain her extremely closed off, cutthroat, and harsh nature. Victims of childhood abuse can develop behavioral problems as a result of that extended period of time that they underwent trauma. We don't really get any indication about when she was brought into the Fright Zone, but it's generally assumed that she's basically been there her entire life. And Shadow Weaver has been a constant, immense presence for the entirety of her existence, threatening her, controlling her, making her fear for her safety, and making her feel less than those around her. That amount of abuse over such an extended period of time can often contribute to development of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD. Now, I'm no doctor, so don't go thinking I have the authority to, diagnose anyone, but what I will say is that Catra's behavior exhibits some pretty stark similarities to the behavioral symptoms of those with CPTSD based on what I found when I researched this. And I'm pretty sure it was intended from the writers to be this way. And I have also found that childhood trauma is commonly linked to the development of this disorder. Through all of this, she internalized this horrible sense of self-worth and carried it with her into her adolescent years, never really addressing it, and instead connecting herself heavily to Adora. And one of the most prevalent aspects of behavior for those with CPTSD are negative self-concepts, self-deprecation, and even flat-out self-loathing, not to mention the inability to control or mitigate intense emotions, as we see in Catra's behavior throughout the series. That jealousy that causes her to lash out when Adora makes other friends, that fierce wall she puts up to hide when she's hurt, all of it stems from Shadow Weaver, her surrogate mother's treatment of her, where she feels automatically that those who care about her will mistreat her or turn on her solely because of who she is as a person. There's this blame she puts on herself that she can't quite reconcile and would never talk about before Season 5 that has developed from her relationship with Shadow Weaver and her upbringing. And it doesn't help that everyone in the Fright Zone is eager to blame everybody else for their mistakes, given the extreme consequences for making one in the first place and how obsessed with punishment punishment Hordak is. I mean, many people have felt the effects or perceive their parents to have a favorite and have felt that, though it's usually subtle. But imagine if it wasn't subtle, like, at all. You were expressly told that you were garbage and not good enough, and that you shouldn't even be around those who are worthy, such as Adora herself. Not only does it lead to this overwhelmingly poor self-esteem, but in general, studies have also shown that it leads to more depressive symptoms in those shunned or disappointment children as they progress into adulthood. And even though she doesn't like Shadow Weaver and resents her for what she's been put through, she was still the woman who raised her, and Catra spent much of the first part of the series chasing her approval, even after she was imprisoned. It's also why when Shadow Weaver takes advantage of her, once again, she is so hurt by it, because she had actually believed she had won her approval after all of these years, but in reality she was just using her to escape from prison. Or it's why, in the false alternate reality when the portal is opened, her perfect life includes Shadow Weaver, rather than eliminating her as a figure entirely, having her as an affectionate mother that cares for both Adora and Catra. I would also add that there's a strong link between CPTSD and dissociative symptoms, where those who have suffered or undergone extensive trauma tend to lose touch with themselves, what is right, what they care about, and would also explain why Catra is so uncaring about the actual state of Etheria, or how badly she hurts Adora emotionally, no matter how much Adora pleads with her or presents her with facts that she is probably going to actually destroy the planet. Especially when combined with the trauma that comes with the betrayal from someone close to them, something I'll dive more into in a little bit, these dissociative tendencies can develop to cope with the intense emotional dysregulation, detaching this person from themselves and their emotions as a way to avoid this intense pain. And as a result of all of this, she often pushes people away before they can actually make that move against her, which she feels is inevitable. She harms Lonnie and Adora for simply hanging out together when they were children and runs away, not accepting help because she feels that Adora doesn't truly care for her and will abandon her for someone who is better than she is at any moment. And deep down, she believes this too, that she doesn't even deserve Adora, and that she is a fundamentally worse person who could never possibly measure up, and that she shouldn't bother trying. The effect that this has on how she treats others cannot be understated, and always has to be considered when discussing Catra's character and why she does the extreme thing she does. She hates herself most of the time. We see this dynamic play out clearly in Promise, where Catra works to beat Adora, rather underhandedly, to attempt to retain control and improve her opinion of herself, and then Lonnie comes in and defends her as it's pretty blatantly unfair. And in the premiere, where Catra sneaks into practice right at the end, stealing the credit, she even says that nothing is too low for her, jokingly, but it definitely shows how she views herself and why she resorts to these underhanded tactics. Now, I understand why this would simply frustrate people and give Catra a bad first impression, but when I reflect on these couple moments, it speaks to how the treatment of these children has affected their dynamic with one another. And before Catra and Adora are even enemies, though we know Catra loves her, she is still willing to trip her up and betray her in a field exercise to be able to be crowned Force Captain. She needs that title to feel good about herself, to prove Shadow Weaver wrong about everything she said about her and Adora, and she doesn't really care about the particulars about how she gets there, because, again, she doesn't need to go the good route because she isn't a good person. Although she holds up that front, for reasons I've already stated, these losses extremely affect her and her sense of self. We see that when she goes into the locker room afterwards. She takes them heavily onto her shoulders and uses them as further proof that she is worse than Adora. So then when Adora comes back, having gotten perspective on the entirety of the war and implores Catra to join her in the first couple episodes, Catra refuses, slinking back into the fright zone. Her worldview is confused, and she feels betrayed by Adora for leaving so quickly and being willing to move on from their life together. Yes, Catra does know that the Horde and Shadow Weaver are not good people and they're not helping Etheria by being there, but she doesn't know that the princesses are wholly good either. She thought the whole world was cruel, and if she could find one bit of salvation, a relationship with Adora, she would hold on to it for dear life. She didn't give a shit about the actual war, just her position, so that she could prove to herself that she has worth. So even though Adora was the only solace for this hell that she was raised in, and she grew to be really codependent with her, her only hope, really, she still couldn't bear to leave the fright zone and take that leap of faith with her. Like, I don't think people really appreciate how much confidence in yourself that takes, and that is something that Catra has just never had. The Horde gives her confidence, and she is a generally presenting, confident person, but she has no ideals to truly believe in, and she definitely doesn't believe in her own will enough to strike out on her own. Because even if it's a home she hates and actively knows is causing pain for others, it's still a home. Leaving that, entering the unknown, facing that fear, or the fact that her time underneath Shadow Weaver was meaningless is not an option for her. And the fact that Adora was able to choose this lures her and leaves her feeling completely and utterly alone, not to mention that she doesn't want to follow Adora and play into that perception of her being second to her, following her every word and command, as if Catra can't do anything herself. It's why she leans so hard into this cutting Adora out mentality during the first and second seasons, wanting to redefine herself and succeed without Adora in her life, carrying her through all of her struggles. It can't possibly work, but she tries desperately to get it to do so. And even though she is definitely surprised that Adora left her and hurt by her betrayal, there is a part of Catra that felt that that would always happen, that Adora was meant to leave her, that she was never good enough to stand by her, and I think that's the part that hurts her the most. But as a result of this perceived betrayal, Catra retreats harshly into her own sense of self-reliance, as Adora was really the only thing she felt was of worth in the Fright Zone, and pushing away all others who were close to her, or just using them, to ultimately get what she wants and prove to herself that she can get along without Adora, that she doesn't need anyone, even though she definitely does. When someone is betrayed by those they trusted the most, the trauma can cause them to fundamentally struggle to form healthy relationships with others in the future, which would explain the stilted friendship that Catra has with Scorpia and Entrapta, even though Scorpia is nothing but generous and congenial with her. She has a fundamental issue trusting those around her and putting faith in those she works with. She thought Adora would always stick by her, stand up for her, even though they were on the wrong side. She promised she would, and that their bond would be the only important thing about their lives. I think this is pushed and developed throughout the first couple seasons as well, pushing Catra further away from Adora and more into this self-reliant bubble. One scene that I love specifically in Promise is when the spider-like mech catches Catra and drags her away from Adora. I don't know about you, but Catra's struggling, pleading, and inability to even scream out was terrifying to me during this sequence. I really felt her helplessness and genuine fear as she cried out for Adora and was heartbroken when Adora wasn't able to reach her. Because as I said before, she's very competitive with Adora, and as much as she resents that perception that Adora is better than her, she does believe it and does expect Adora to come and rescue her. But however, she is able to get out of the grip of the spider on her own, proving to herself once again who the only person she can rely on really is. It's a stark reminder of how things occurred over and over when they were children, right down to Shadow Weaver restricting her movement, and that resentment toward Adora for never truly standing up to Shadow Weaver only grew and grew as she aged, which pushes her to make the harsh decision at the end of this episode to leave Adora to presumably fall to her death. Which is quite extreme, but I think it's an excellent moment for her character, and a turn that definitely made sense in my eyes, but was also incredibly enjoyable to watch. Great writing. But not only this, in the harsh environment that she was raised in, selfishness was almost taught as like a virtue. To protect herself physically and emotionally, she needed 1, to put up walls so that others don't get the opportunity to hurt her, and 2, develop thick skin and a fierce drive to succeed, or else she'd be left behind. And then the one person she let past her walls betrayed her, so she sinks so far into these tendencies that she was taught and were ingrained into her for most of her life. So she works her way up Hordak's chain without regard for how she does so, eventually even surpassing Shadow Weaver, though she learns that succeeding doesn't exactly bring the satisfaction that she thought it would, and that this culture of selfish ambition leads to a lack of trust and community, something that everyone needs to be able to live a full life and thrive. Hordak still outwardly abuses her and makes her feel small and out of control by taking away her oxygen this time, despite her position, and even after surpassing her, Shadow Weaver doesn't show her any compassion or respect, something that she thought she could earn with enough work. But also due to this culture, she refuses to admit failures to Hordak Hordak and to herself, saying that she's letting Adora win, or scrambling to cover them up, leading to distrust from Hordak himself, and eventually learning her mistakes and dismissing her entirely. I think lying to him had a large amount to do with that. Hordak don't like that. But even after losing her newfound position and being cast away, she's able to make her way back to the top. Not through any loyalty to Hordak or belief in his cause though, but solely through belief in herself, retreating further into that costume of the self-reliant kitty who doesn't need anyone that cares about her and can do everything by herself. She dominates the wasteland, pushing aside everyone in her path and absolutely stampeding over the culture that was already established, proving that this self-reliant leader who uses those around her would be the most successful version of herself, and the one, and this is key, that would be open to the least amount of emotional pain. But here's the kicker. Even after everything that she's gone through making a life for herself in the waste, and even after Scorpia declares that they could continue to have a life there, she still goes crawling back to the Horde. Although she's found some happiness, a place where she has gained some sense of self-worth, although she has people who care for her, she intrinsically feels the need to prove herself to the Horde and to show Adora that she was wrong for leaving her. That codependence is still there even after they are not together. So when she eventually does return, she's more hell-bent than ever on succeeding, even after every part of the plan begins to fall apart, like in Moment of Truth, when even Entrapta tries to pump the brakes on the portal plan. Knowing that it could fundamentally destroy Etheria entirely, she has put everything, her whole life, everything that could have made her happy, on the line. This is where a ton of people gave up on Catra. But think about it like this. If she does pull this lever, everyone, including herself, goes away from her perspective. It honestly scared me how willing she was to do away with everything. It showed viscerally how little she valued her own life and how easily she could do away with everything that she cares about. That dissociation I was speaking about earlier is so strong, and she is so far removed from reality that all she needs to do is win. And then sometimes it feels like parts of Catra wants to lose against the princesses, dying in battle, which is perhaps part of why she continues to fight against them despite their numerous successes. Instead, however, she gets pretty much everything that she wanted in this fantasy world, with Adora by her side and a kind, motherly Shadow Weaver, which is why she clings so fiercely to it, even when Adora informs her of what it means for all of Etheria, and, you know, she becomes this kind of half-destroyed spirit thing in the fantasy world. It's very interesting, and she was quite scary. But it's funny. As well as this works for her, with the blows that she deals to the princesses and the successes for the Horde, like losing the queen, when she loses everyone around her, she spirals into depression and self-loathing. In season 4, after losing that fantasy world, she becomes more closed off than ever, hell-bent on destroying Adora and the princesses for good, and slowly losing her mind, even though the Horde has the most advantageous position over the princesses than they ever have in the series. This is more evident than ever after Scorpia leaves her in this 4th season. Ultimately, her sense of self is defined by other people, as I've said. As much as she tries to protest that she can do everything by herself, she only feels of worth when she's useful to others, but due to her drive to succeed, she doesn't treat those people that she needs by her side with their deserved respect, and so they don't end up staying loyal to her. She throws all of her friendships away by asserting superiority or just lack of care in the effort to prove herself worthy to Hordak, and because she doesn't really think she could better herself or treat people kindly anyway, because again, she is fundamentally not Adora. She loses sight of what is actually most important, and once Scorpia is gone, the only one she keeps in contact with is Double Trouble, who consistently reminds her they're only in it for the money. So she quickly spirals downward, losing sense of her purpose, and though she tries hard to put up a strong front in front of Hordak, she is no longer capable of efficiently doing her job. Due to so many people leaving her, from her perspective, betraying her, she grows more and more paranoid and distrustful of those around her, frantically searching for Scorpia in the slight hope that she didn't ruin their relationship, even though, again, deep down, Catra feels that she will push away everyone close to her anyway. But when it actually happens, it's a different, different reaction. There's a really great scene in Fractures with Lonnie that always gets to me when I rewatch the show too, where Catra almost reaches out to her old friend, and Lonnie even almost moves to comfort her. But ultimately, Catra's paranoia gets the better of her, and she lashes out in fear once again, pushing Lonnie away before or they can actually leave her and cause the same amount of pain that Scorpia did. And this is illustrated further when Double Trouble absolutely reads her ass at the end of the season, correctly pointing out that she's trying really hard to be this self-reliant villain when she never really wanted to be one in the first place, that she's only doing this out of a reaction or to be a distraction to her pain, to avoid working and bettering herself. Horde Prime brings a bit of hope for her by providing her a new sense of purpose after she had really lost everything. I mean, straight up, she was asking Glimmer to finish her off in the season 4 finale. She felt absolutely beaten, helpless, and that her life had no more value, that it shouldn't even continue. It was honestly heartbreaking for me to see Catra in this condition, far away from her usual confident self, even if that is a front, and this is what was always hiding behind it. She does definitely learn something about herself here, where Double Trouble directly tells her that she shouldn't blame everyone for leaving because there's one common denominator: her.
People have hurt you.
They didn't believe in you. They didn't trust you.
Didn't need you. Left you.
But did you ever stop to think? Maybe they're not the problem?
It's you. You drive them away, Wildcat.
When she steps up to stop Prime from doing anything to Glimmer at the very end of the season, there is definite self-interest, her starting to work her way up again, but also a desire to protect that which Adora cares so much about. But even though Horde Prime brings a massive, terrifying, intimidating fleet, and it's impossible to see how Catra would be able to make any sort of life for herself here, she's willing to accept it, or at least the concept of it, and resolves to start working her way back up from the bottom, as she's done before. She finds renewed worth, a second chance in Horde Prime, thinking that even though she's failed with Hordak, she can still end up winning. When we're at our lowest, we find hope in the strangest and not always the healthiest of places. It takes an extremely hopeless, completely terrifying situation to get her to see the reality of what she's doing. When she is faced with Adora's possible demise as Horde Prime shows her on the screen, adding to her growing realization that she will never get true freedom under his regime. One aspect of Catra's character that I always found to be extremely realistic and very compelling in a villain, because it's so frustrating, is her self-centered obsession with winning against Adora and the princesses, no matter what it costs. It's very indicative of many people's thinking during this day and age in real life, where so many people can just ignore or turn a blind eye or gladly accept lies about these obvious atrocities that are going on in their own country and pretty objectively morally reprehensible things. But in the face of extreme fear and intense violence, that shield that some people use dissolves away, and she begins to force herself to open up to those she never thought she could. Glimmer to be able to find some sort of solace in this incredibly hopeless place she has put herself into. And then, as a result, Catra is able to help the princesses and the rebellion immensely. This is why I struggle to understand why people want to see Catra punished and miserable so badly. They literally could not have succeeded or beat Horde Prime without her help, her instincts, and her friendship. Those qualities that make Catra Catra, not the symptoms of her treatment as a child, her determination, her strength, her ingenuity, all of it is essential for the team to be able to overcome this really impossible threat, and she doesn't have to use it to destroy them. They can be great qualities. I doubt anyone as bold as Catra would have been able to pull off setting Glimmer free, or daring enough to even try for that matter. Not to mention that she's also very cunning and patient with her betrayal of Horde Prime as well, gathering enough necessary information to be able to be of real aid to the rebellion. And most importantly, she's able to admit her care for others and accept their help to be able to overcome these negative self-concepts and harsh self-reliance. It isn't overnight either. It did definitely feel earned to me, as I've heard many people say the opposite, where in season 5 she struggles even after her rescue and grand gesture to save Glimmer, to let Adora and the princesses fully welcome her into this group, to care for her and to let others see her as anything other than a force to be reckoned with, or this antagonistic figure. She even encourages them to leave her behind, to be alone forever at first, resolving to retreat back into that role that she is more comfortable with. I mean, it's important to also recognize that she has once again undergone an extremely traumatic experience and has developed PTSD from such. It's understandable why she'd be touchy and closed off immediately after her rescue, especially when it comes to treating the chip on her neck, which actively causes her mental distress. They also demonstrate her growth through her ability to show extreme empathy for others, like Milog, who is particularly particularly receptive to one's emotions. It shows how much more grounded in reality and caring for others she has become after this snapback to reality that she has received. Catra is the only one, by the way, who is able to identify and connect with them. And Milog, by the way, also becomes extremely important for the rebellion going forward, namely those invisibility powers. Straight broken. But I love Catra earning this companion and growing in strength through her personal development and willingness to grow and accept that which would have previously caused her intense stress. I mean, Milog even helps her to not run away near the end of the series when Adora reveals that she is going to sacrifice herself. That's my favorite moment between the two of them. Milog and Catra are emotionally bonded, and Milog is a great symbol of her growth and kind of her conscience coming back. So when she is leaving, part of her really doesn't want to, that wants to stay with Adora until the end. But there's a lot of painful reminders in this conversation where Shadow Weaver once again is telling Adora that she is the only one who can fix this, that she is destined for greatness, that Catra is a distraction to her and is going to hinder her from doing her job. All of this makes Catra retreat back into those tendencies that she is more used to, right? That is kind of her reflex to leave everyone behind and once again be that self-reliant person who doesn't care about anybody else because everybody always leaves her. Adora will always choose to leave her. I understand people's frustration with Catra in this moment, but it makes so much sense and was such great writing that they didn't make Catra switch into this immediately different character. It is still very clearly Catra herself, and they very deliberately developed her over the course of season 5, but not to the point that she had forgotten who she was before this completely. She still has all of that pain inside of her, still has work to do to deal with it, but is working on it. And that, I think, is one of the best parts of Catra's arc, honestly. But she is able to admit and show to Adora, especially, how much she cares for her and truly loves her, coming back after running away, and showing her that she has learned how to accept and allow others into her life, allow others to help her, admit to others that she needs them. First, by helping to free Glimmer, and as a consequence, sacrificing her own peace and position willingly. I mean, she goes through a lot of pain due to this decision, and she knows that she will face those consequences ahead of time, but is still willing to make that decision faced with Adora's ultimate loss. See, she was always willing to beat Adora because a part of her knew that She-Ra and the princesses would likely ass-pull despite her plans and draw out the battle longer. Like I said earlier, she didn't really want to win. She fully expected herself to eventually lose. What she didn't want was for the battle to actually just end, for Adora to actually die. I think it's really important to show compassion to those who are misled and who lash out at others due to their own self-hatred. Now, this isn't to say you should let people step all over you, but I do think there is benefit to patience and understanding, and that can lead to these people truly listening and learning what the right path is. And I fully believe that Catra is an excellent example of this. One of the best written villain turns I have seen in a very, very long time. I really appreciated her deliberate change and how clear her treatment, her upbringing, all of that affected her behavior and how she treated others later in her life. It's one of the most important parts of She-Ra, honestly, and I am saddened that so many people want to see Catra in pain because that is really not good for anyone, and, you know, giving her a chance at the end of the series, she is able to grow. But it is important to recognize how punishment affects people and doesn't really help rehabilitate them, and then they learn these negative tendencies to cope with this really negative self-perception. I always felt bad for Catra. All I wanted was for her to feel good about herself, and I'm glad by the end of the series she got to a place where she could be satisfied. She's not done. By no means does the show portray her as done developing, but the most important moment for her arc happens in the finale. The biggest turn that shows that she is on the right path, that she will be okay, that she will allow these people into her life and allow them to get close to her so that she can care for them and have people care for her, like everybody needs. Can't do everything yourself, people, okay? It's not codependence to say that you need other people around. We literally need human interaction. But anyway, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty if you enjoyed this video, and then there you can get the extra content, like before all of it comes out on YouTube, and you get the essays completely unedited. So if you're on Patreon and you're listening to the unedited version, you heard this video. Flat out disaster. I kept trying to add stuff that was not in the script. I get excited sometimes, guys, and I am very scatterbrained. But if you're watching on YouTube, go to Patreon and you can hear all those lovely mistakes. But the support on YouTube really does mean a lot to us too, so please discuss further in the comments, like, subscribe, do all of that lovely stuff, and spread positivity wherever you go in the world. Tell someone they look nice today. Tell a man that he looks nice today. He never fucking hears that. He will remember it for the rest of his life.